Welcome to the channel. My name is Kuber. I'm a GIC licensed immigration consultant, and we bring you anything and everything to do with Canadian immigration and everything around it. Yesterday was, I wouldn't say an exciting day. It was always on the horizon, right? We knew that some announcements will be made at some point of time because the postgraduate work permit extensions were going to happen this year. As in 2023, the announcements were made only in March, right? Postgraduate work permit, people who were on study permit in Canada, they were allowed to work full time. That announcement was made last year. So these announcements sometimes are made at the very end. So we knew there was an announcement coming, especially to do with the 20-hour waiver, but we did not know when that was going to happen. And just, I think a few days back, I made a video and I said that, it's good if the announcements are made in time so that the people have more time to react to it. People have more time to plan and work and figure out what they need to do. So one thing was good that they made the announcements. What was not good, the announcement by itself. So Mark Fraser, I keep saying Sean Fraser, Mark Miller. It's still hung in there, right? Sean Fraser. So Mark Miller, who is the Immigration Minister of Canada, he did come out yesterday and he made 5 different announcements. Now, out of those 5, most important are the 3. The other 2 are, it doesn't really impact our day-to-day lives. Eventually, it might, but on the hindsight of things, it doesn't really impact. But the first and the biggest one that was announced was the postgraduate work permit 2024 and beyond, the extensions. So for people who do not know still, postgraduate work permits were, first of all, postgraduate work permits cannot be extended. There is no provision under the law to extend a postgraduate work permit. They are given only once. They're given once in a lifetime. So even if you study in Canada again, you cannot get another work permit, rather a postgraduate work permit. However, because of the COVID pandemic, they did make the exception. They made public policies so that postgraduate work permits could be extended. It happened in 2021, 22, and of course, it happened in 2021. Though 2023 was seeming unlikely, and they really waited, and a lot of uproar happened, and finally they did extend. And anybody whose postgraduate work permit is expiring, the original postgraduate work permit is expiring until the 31st of December 2023, then they would be eligible to apply for an extension of the postgraduate work permit. Now, obviously, since they've been doing it for the last few years, there was this general feeling that they might do it for 2024. Now, this is where a lot of you are going to probably throw some brickbats at me, because I'm going to say some things which you might not want to hear, some things which you might not like to hear, but that is a fact. So let's get the facts right. Why is there an expectation that the postgraduate work permit should be extended? Right? Why should that be an expectation? It's in the law that they don't extend it. They did it, as I said, public policy was made as an exception because of the COVID. COVID is long gone. Yes, there is that debate, there is that argument that because of the COVID, a lot of people were not able to get their jobs, were not able to find meaningful employment, and therefore they should be given 2024 extension as well. But every time they do give the extension, the following year, for example, they gave it in 2022, 23, were expecting an extension. When they gave it in 23, 24 was expecting an extension. If they give it in 24, 25 will be expecting an extension as well. Part of it is also because this was being sold as an idea by a lot of agents out there as well, who said, okay, if you study, you will not only get 1 year, then you will get another 1.5 years. So they were trying to sell it in that manner. But that expectation, to be very honest, put a lot of pressure on a lot of people, and that sort of made them feel. So first of all, you have to be reasonable with yourself, be realistic with yourself and say, was that a fair expectation? Number one. In terms of law, we're not talking about the dynamics of life. We're not talking about the economies of life. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the actual law. Was there a provision there? Number one. Number two, always remember that Canada will do everything in Canada's favor, not in your favor, not in my favor, not in anybody else's favor. Whatever Canada will do, it will always be in the benefit, in the favor of the Canadian public, Canada as a country by and large. So if you start feeling that sense of entitlement, or if you start feeling that you have been wronged because I don't do it for you, then I don't think you need to blame Canada for it. then you got to look at other things and start thinking what was happening. So this is the first thing that we all need to sort of understand in terms of setting our expectations right now. Did, or rather, should they have done it, or shouldn't have they have done it? Again, that's not for me to sort of come out and talk to you about, because it's not in my hands. We can only sit and speculate. We can all play on different sides of the debate and say, yes, it should have been done, no, it should have been. But right now, they are playing to the sentiment of the general public in Canada at large. Now, obviously, there are elections. Elections are around the corner in a year's time. Liberals, which is a coalition ruling party, are not in a very good favor at this point of time. People are quite upset. Housing crisis is there. The inflation is there. Job market is not looking very nice. By and large, the sentiment, and if you were keeping an eye on what was happening earlier this year, the housing crisis, suddenly everybody started blaming international students for it. Then international students were in the news because of the food bank issue, right? There were some people who made these videos about how to get free food from the food bank. Well, did not get a good press on that one. Then there were videos of some international students who were sleeping on the streets because they could not afford. Again, did not make for very good press. So collectively, and obviously there is some anti-immigration sentiment amongst the people. It is growing up, as you can see, the newspaper, the media, the polls. It is growing. So collectively, there has been this sentiment against international students, against the number of immigrants, or the increasing number of immigration. And hence, I think they had to sort of toe that line at some point of time. And eventually, this policy had to end. It was not going to continue forever. It's sad that it has ended in 2023 itself, and that they have now been very, very straightforward. Mark Miller was very, very curt and very, very straightforward and said that there is no more extensions of this policy. So that was the first thing. I know it's hard-hitting. I know it was devastating for people who were really, really hoping and praying that this would come through. I know it's quite angering as well. Sometimes some of you were quite upset about this as well. But then this is a fact. And this is something where, as I said, you have to set your expectations right. So this is the first thing. Let's get that out of the way, and we'll talk about the other dynamics about this whole thing as well. The second thing that happened, which he announced, was the GIC. Now we are all referring to as GIC, Guaranteed Investment Certificate, but what they were referring to as that in the year 2000, when the international students program was prepared, or rather revamped, they identified $10 per year as the funds that people should be able to show for single person for their living expenses. That was the year 2000. We are in 2023. 23 years later, obviously you could not expect that would continue to happen, right? And of course, as I just said earlier, the fact about international students going to the food bank, some of them, not all of them, of course, some of them, but then that's how it is, right? Small numbers do it. They get a bad press, and everybody gets branded in the same manner. So there were some people who made these videos on YouTube claiming that you can get free food. Obviously, that did not go down very well with a lot of people, because people, they're not very well off. They donate money, they donate food to the food banks so that the homeless, people who really, really need it, can get advantage of it. It is not meant to be a free food option for international students. At least that is how those videos were made. And after that, of course, there was also a lot of media and press about people who were sleeping on the streets, some international students, because they couldn't find houses, housing crisis, they couldn't afford the rent, etc., etc. Plus, of course, the inflation has gone up. You and I, we both know and we agree that $10,000 per year is just not going to cut it in terms of the living expenses per year. So therefore, they have increased that amount to $2,635, which is the 75% of LICO. LICO stands for low income cutoff. Now, each year, Stats Canada will make that announcement of what the low income cutoff for that year is, and it will vary depending on the family size. So for one person, the LICO amount was announced. 75% of that is now $20,635, which is the funds that you are required as an international student. If you are making an application effective 1st of January, this is the amount of money you should have for your living expenses, for your comfortable living expenses, to sort of show in your application. Of course, if you're a family of 2, 3, 4, 5, that number will increase in corresponding manner. And this number is not fixed. So earlier 10,000 was fixed. 20,635 is not fixed. It will change every year depending on the LICO amount for that year. So this is something which all the international students who are now preparing to come to Canada are planning to be in Canada, they will have to take into account. To be very honest, it is at par with what Australia needs. They need about 24,000. What England needs, they need about 12,000 UK pounds. That's what New Zealand needs, New Zealand dollars 20,000. US doesn't have any amount. US asks for about 10,000 US dollars or more, which probably, but then the cost of living is slightly lower in the US. But correspondingly, 20,635 is the requirement. So people who are now preparing to come to Canada as an international student, they will need to show that at least for 1 year as a single person. I know this is going to hit hard for people because it's only 3 weeks to go, and people who were going to submit an application for the May intake, for next year September intake, they are going to get impacted. I can see a lot of agents back there in India, elsewhere, squirming as to how are they going to figure that out. A lot of people are going to resort to some fraudulent documents. They're going to resort to some other means as well. It's my suggestion. Please do not do that, because as in how things are progressing, because IRCC has been under a lot of heat when the Brijesh Mishra case happened, where 700 international students claimed that they had fraudulent acceptance letter. There are efforts to ensure that the program integrity is maintained. So if you try to provide any fraudulent documents, it can become an issue. Jorge says, I need a microphone. I agree. My microphone today is not the best, but I had to make do with this or continue to delay today's live stream. I do have plenty of microphones. It's just that the one that I needed today, I don't have it right now. Apologies for that. So the third thing that Mark Miller announced was that, earlier last year, they had announced that people who had submitted a study permit application or had a study permit application by the 7th of October 2022 were eligible to work full-time or were eligible to work more than 20 hours per week until the end of 2023, which is 31st of December 2023. Now, normally under the regular provisions, an international student is allowed to work for 20 hours. This provision, this exemption allowed them to work for much more than that. So a lot of people working 40 hours, 50 hours as well. It's a known fact, to meet the very expensive tuition fees and very expensive cost of living, there is a lot of students have to resort to working. And they have to work hard. They have to work for excessive number of hours so that they can meet their expenses, they can meet the tuition fees, and therefore giving them the legal option of working for longer duration of time absolutely helped them. But did that help them study as well? Well, that is where it became an issue, because if you are studying full time, then working for 40 hours is just not going to happen, in the sense that focus completely on your studies for in a full-time period of studies, and then also work 40 hours and then manage your course load. This was seen as something which was not happening. Also, it was seen as Canada trying to obviously get cheap labor, and Mark Miller has been quoted quite well, and there are already memes about it as to how this whole thing is happening. And it did not give very good soundbite. It did not look very nice on the media as well. So therefore, there was a lot of flack. A lot of Canadians were saying that since you're allowing international students to now work full time, that is also taking away their jobs. So again, there was that negative sentiment. And as I said, right now, I wouldn't call it a vote bank politics, but yes, if you as a government, as a ruling party or as a ruling coalition party, if you're not going to listen to people and you're not going to sort of offer them relief as per those concerns, then obviously they're not going to be seeing the next elections, right? So collectively, in so many ways, this was all seen as that. But what they did is that they did not give a blanket extension to the full-time work permit. What they've done is that since 20 hours there was a waiver of 20 hours per week, which means that you can work for more than 20 hours per week as an international student. As of 7th of December, which was yesterday, all international students who were earlier allowed to legally work can now work full-time until the end of April. That is also the end of the academic year. Mark Miller also said that they will be looking at revising it's still under discussion, still haven't finalized, that they will be revising this 20 hours to 30 hours and make that as a permanent feature for international students. 40 hours is unattainable because it just does not bind very well. So 30 hours per week is something which they are looking for a future value at this point of time. But that would be something which I'm sure most international students would welcome, as in 30 hours per week being a full-time employment, and that is something which they can manage, they can cope. But collectively, these were the three main announcements that were made yesterday. There were two others as well. One about people who were still studying part-time, were studying online. They would still have the eligibility for the work permit. So that was one. Most people are already working, studying online full-time. So that is not really of much of a consequence. And then there was this another statement that Mark Miller made, actually a very, very assertive one, where he said, enough is enough. And the provinces have to start regulating. Provinces have to start looking at how the DLIs, designated learning institutions, are performing, regulate them, be strict with the way they are performing, and obviously make sure that they are providing enough support to the international students in terms of community support, and that if they are not going to do it, then the federal government is going to clamp down and do it, and that could also include limiting the number of international student visas that are being issued. I'm not sure what that clamping down would look like in the near future, but this basically was a warning to what he referred to as puppy mills, right? So these diploma mills, which are referred to, which have shot out across all different plazas in different parts of Canada, which obviously are not providing any quality education as such, but they're charging you the stop dollars. And this was targeted towards that if they do not rope them in and regulate them in a better manner so that they are giving proper education, proper support to the students, then these guys were going to come down there. So these were the 5 main announcements. But out of this, let me come back to the first one about the postgraduate work permit extensions, which has hit the hardest for most of the student community. Now, obviously, we posted about this on Instagram, we posted about this on Twitter, and there were some barrage of remarks from international students. Some of them were getting into tiff with each other. But regardless of whatever, this decision has been made. This announcement has been made. So nothing is going to change as far as this particular extension policy not being extended is concerned. Now, should this have happened? Should this not have happened? These discussions can go on and on and on. You cannot see the end of the day, but that doesn't really matter. The fact that international students contribute in a huge manner, that cannot be debated. International study business in Canada is worth more than $26 billion. We will never know the exact amount because, hey, we cannot know the exact amount. But it's worth $26 billion and more. It is one of the largest economic contributors. Of course, these are the education business, and then there are those auxiliary services, right? International students have to live somewhere, so somebody will have to rent them houses. Somebody will have to, offer them food, or rather, they'll have to buy food somewhere, and so many different services. Of course, as international students, while they are working, they are also, of course, paying taxes, and when they're paying taxes, that is also contributed. So in a large way, international students contribute to a huge factor, to a huge advantage of Canadian economy, no doubt about it. Over the last few years, the number of international students in Canada has increased, 500,000, then 600,000. At this point of time, it's more than 900,000. As an there are also spouses of international students who come to Canada, and again, they are also working. They are also adding in terms of the job market. They're adding to the taxations, or to whatever you want to call it. A lot of them are also working as a frontline workers. So they're working in the healthcare industry. They're working in the hospitality industry. Now, there are a lot of people who have a lot of negative things to say. But at the end of the day, if you remove the international student component out of Canada, it is going to make a huge impact, negative impact on the Canadian economy, on the Canadian market at this point of time. And I don't like that term, but it has been said so many times, especially by the minister himself, as cheap labor. International students were seen as a valuable asset. And then he also said that there are so many jobs which Canadians don't want to do. They are low-paying jobs at the entry level. They are absolutely at the minimum wage level, which the Canadians don't want to do. But who's going to do those jobs? Who's going to work in all these entry-level positions? It is mainly the international students who come out and work there. If you remove this component, then who's going to fill up those jobs? Not only that, Sometimes we look only at these entry-level jobs and say this is all that international students do. That is wrong. That is not correct. A lot of international students, because they lack skills or qualifications, or sometimes they just need a survival job because they got to meet their expenses, do take up these jobs, no doubt about it. But there are many thousands of international students who are actually working in security, who are working in cybersecurity, who are working in IT companies, who are working in financial companies, who are working in administrative roles, who are also working in some other government departments as well. Collectively, if you, again, as I said, and I keep repeating this, if you remove the international student component, Canada is going to get impacted negatively. But just because some international students are upset and angry and they say, okay, we will leave Canada and go, does that mean nobody else will want to come to Canada? Well, at the end of the day, Canada is still one, if not the top, but one of the top destination of choice for international students. Now, is that entirely because of the quality of education? Not really. I mean, especially if you look at the puppy mills. I mean, how many of Canadian institutions are in the top 10, top 20, top 50, top 100 educational institutions across the world, right? You cannot count too many of them. And most of these people who are coming, most of these international students who are coming, which colleges are they going to? Which universities are they choosing? And if they're actually choosing the same puppy mills that we were talking about, that Mark Miller was talking about, and they do it because some friends told them, some relatives told them, some agent down their street, some uncle, some chacha, some mama, some paya, some of their relatives, somebody else recommended go to this college without even having done your research, without even having figured out, then who are you going to blame? Canada or yourself? Also, one thing that people absolutely confuse, and this is something which I would really want you to take a look at, is why are you coming to Canada to study? Because out of this 900,000 international students who are there in Canada at this point of time, I am absolutely certain, and put your hand on your heart and tell me if I'm lying. Most of you are not coming to Canada to study. Most of you. Okay, could be a small fractional percentage, and kudos to you for choosing Canada, but then you probably would be in some of the top ranking universities or colleges anyways, right? Or you would be actually seeking education in a specific field, which there are not too many out there. But most of you are not here in Canada because you are here to study. You're here because you saw that as a pathway to PR, because somebody sold you that Canadian dream through the pathway of studying in Canada, then becoming a PR. But did you research completely the whole pathway? Did you check that exactly what's going to happen at each stage? And ever since COVID pandemic hit, and then we knew that things are going to look bad, and I had been screaming on top of the mountain that Canadian PR is getting difficult. It is difficult. It is very difficult. You got to watch out. You got to check. What were you doing? What were you looking at? If today, which is the 8th of December, and we are only less than a month away from the new year, and a lot of you will be losing your status early next year, January, February, March, April, and now you are freaking out as to what to do with your status, then will you really blame Canada or will you blame yourself? All this time that you had, French was the option. Getting experience in a category which is now being identified as a category-based draws, which have been happening, right? Healthcare has been happening, skilled trades has happened, transport has happened already once. STEM, yes, that's a different ballgame altogether. For some reason, STEM category draws have not happened, but that's a discussion for tomorrow. If you will join me again for a live stream tomorrow morning. But apart from that, if you still haven't found a PNP route, if you still haven't found an employer who's going to support you, then in a big manner, a lot of you will find that it's not Canada who has to be blamed. Probably somewhere down there could be a lack of effort from your side, or that lack of expectation that something will happen which will make it happen for you. Most people are in Ontario. I mean, so many consultations that I do, so many people are asking for options. I don't have any magical options. I do not have any magical doors or keys that I can show you. Everything is known. For any PNP option, you need employer support. And to get employer support, if you haven't already been working with them or you haven't won their trust already, getting employer support today with 25 lakh, 2.5 million people who are already out there in Canada as international students, workers, looking for the same thing, you can imagine how difficult it's going to be. So what are your options? First of all, If you still have an option to improve your IELTS, CELPIP, or French scores, please do it. Okay. I will not encourage fake extensions, but you have to know that that is an option. It's a technical loophole. I'm not going to go much into detail as to what fake extension is, but basically, even if you are not eligible to apply for a work, you're not, obviously, because there is no other public policy happening, you are not going to be eligible to apply for extensions. You may, I'm wondering if I'm going to get trashed for it, but you may apply for an extension probably closer to the expiry date so that you get the maximum benefit of being on implied status. So because you're on an implied status, you can continue the conditions of your valid, whatever is your valid work permit, which was earlier before it expired, that continues. Those conditions are still there. But once you do get the decision, then you can no longer work because the decision is going to be a refusal. You will not be allowed to work from that date onwards. You will also lose status. Then you will have 90 days to restore your status, whereby you can then change your status to a visitor. That does not mean applying for TRV. Applying for TRV does not mean changing your status to a visitor. Changing your status to a visitor basically means you apply for a visitor record. A lot of people confuse that as well. And that would allow you to continue being in Canada. Now, because you applied for fake extensions, as this is referred to, which basically means applying for a work permit extension while you're still not eligible, you will basically get an implied status. That implied status could vary from few weeks to few months. At this point of time, the processing time is roughly 4 to 5 months. So probably that is the time you get. For some people, that is very valuable because they may be able to complete their 1 year of work experience or 2 years of work experience in the month of, and they need that 1 month or 2 months kind of period. So for them, it is quite valuable. For others, it just gives them an opportunity to continue staying here and working and finding a suitable employer if they can, or a suitable option. And after that, they can change their status to a visitor and continue being in Canada until the validity of their visitor record. So this will allow you to be in Canada, but nothing will change if you don't change and figure out what you're going to do for your permanent residence. Also, if you do choose to return back to your home country, all is not lost. You can choose to return back to your home country. If you are a CEC, if you have Canadian work experience, you will still have those points. Even if you're outside Canada, you will continue to be a CEC. For Canadian experience class, you should have 1 year of valid work experience in Canada within the last 3 years. So you will still have 2 more years until your work experience points start vanishing. So all is not lost. Keeping your eyes open on PNP. I have another PNP announcement to make. Newfoundland and Labrador has a virtual job fair for people in the Middle East and people in Southeast Asia. I'll be posting that link in a little while. I don't have it with me, but that is something which you can also look at. In addition to that, if you still want to continue being in Canada, you can choose to study another program. Probably this time you will choose wisely and you will choose a program which has a direct benefit. For example, if you studied Masters in Ontario, you studied Masters in British Columbia in one of the specified fields, or you studied in New Brunswick, all of these give you options to apply these directly after completing your master's program. With Ontario, of course, you also need to have those points and qualify to that. But these are primarily the announcements that was made and the impact that has created. I know a lot of you are not going to like what is happening, but as I said, Canada will always do what is in the favor of the country. I was not looking to answer a lot of questions in today's stream. We'll do question and answers tomorrow, but very quickly going to take those 3 super chats. Please do not post any more super chats. The address I have on the passport is a property my family owns, but I'm not living those currently. What address would be preferable, as my family can be present at both locations as PCC? Well, as far as PCC is concerned, whatever is your current address for which you can provide proof of address, you should provide that and get a PCC there. Because if you try to have a different address than is already indicated in your passport, then you will need to give more documentation. But you can always refer to Passport Seva Kendra. If your address has not changed, if your address is same as your passport, then you usually have a much more convenient processing from them. And if you can be at that address, then of course the policeman is going to come and verify the address and validate it, and you should be PCC. Can I extend my work permit until March 25, relying on my spouse's visa, as my spouse's work permit is valid and mine expires on May 24? I do not know what your spouse's permit is. If your spouse is on a postgraduate work permit and it is valid until May or whatever, then yes, you can apply for your extension based on your spouse's work permit. Or if your spouse is on a study permit and her study permit is valid until May or whatever, and you can then extend it. So yes, if your spouse is also on a postgraduate work permit, or your spouse is on an open work permit, then obviously based on your spouse's work permit, you cannot extend. But if your spouse is on a closed, if your spouse is on a postgraduate work permit, if your spouse is on a study permit, then based on that, as normal, you can apply for your spouse open work permit extension. Do you have any insight on what is going on with eCOPR? It takes months to get one. It is a 15-minute procedure. Does IRCC do it on purpose? I'm sure they don't do it on purpose. There is no reason for them to do these kind of things on purpose. I know there is a delay. There is a delay in COPRs. There is a delay in sending out, the email confirmations after your the first email that comes out. Then getting your second portal access is a delay. Then getting your eCOPR is a delay. What is the reason? I don't know. I don't think anybody out there knows. I know there is a backlog. I know there were some technical issues, but those were long resolved. Now it is just primarily an administrative delay because they are restructuring the departments. They are reassigning a lot of duties to different staff. But apart from that, no further information is available. I know it is a long wait and frustrating at that, but this is where you need to have a bit of patience. This is the end of the road, right? Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining in. We shall catch up again tomorrow in our live stream, tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, when we'll talk more about what's happening. I'll see you then.